Okay, so what the speaker says in the video is that if you take a millimeter and divide it by 1,000 into 1,000 parts, you get 1 micrometer, or a micron for short, she says, right? And then if you take 1 micrometer and divide that by 1,000, you get 1 nanometer. And that's kind of one of the things that we're going to be doing, is kind of changing the units. So here we're converting millimeters to microns. Here we're converting micrometers or microns into nanometers by dividing by 1,000. One of the things to remember is that in the metric system, everything is multiples of 10. So it's either 10 or 100 or 1,000 that you're going to be dividing by. So that's one way to think about it. Okay, so here's a chart that is telling you kind of what was in the other video with Bill Nye the Science Guy, that this is your base unit, meters, right? And everything has meter on the end. But if I wanted 1,000 meters, that's a kilometer, right? Kilo means 1,000. We're probably not going to be working with hecto and deca as much, but decimeter and centimeter. So one thing to notice is that as you go down the table, like this, what are you dividing by each time? Right? They're getting smaller. So you're dividing by 10 each time. Dividing by 10, right? To get from one to the other. So if you want to skip 2, you would divide by 100. If you want to skip 3, you divide by 1,000, right? And that's one reason why when you go from kilometers to meters, right? It's 1, 2, 3, you divide by 1,000. So that's one way to think about it. This chart is really handy. So let's just do an example. All right, what if you wanted to know how many meters are there in 4 kilometers, 4 kilometers, right? So we want to know, we have kilometers, and we want to know how many meters there are, right? Well, one thing that you can do is think of it this way. We have 4 kilometers, and I also know, I'm going to make a little chart here, that there are 1,000 meters in 1 kilometer. So what I'm putting here is the conversion units that we know from the table that we just saw, right? And what happens when you multiply across is these kilometers are going to cancel, and I get 4 times 1,000 equals 4,000 meters. So that's kind of an easy way to do it. Think about how many meters are there in a kilometer, and I can multiply them together. So there's 1,000 meters in 1 kilometer, so there's going to be 4,000 meters in 4 kilometers. Okay, so what if I wanted to change 175 centimeters to meters? So this is another, so I'm going to start with what I have, 175 centimeters. And what are the units that I want to change it to? I want to change it to meters. And what's the conversion that I know? There, in 1 meter, there are 100 centimeters, right? So the centimeters are going to cancel, and I get 175 divided by 100 meters. And 175 divided by 100 is 1.75 meters, or 1 3/4 meters. Okay, so this table is a little confusing, but it's really handy to have. So what this table is giving you is the fraction of the base unit, the meter, that each of these other units is, right? So for example, this number here, decimeter, it says 10, but that just means it's 1/10 of a meter. Centimeter says 100, but that means it's 1/100th. So the one that's kind of tricky is the kilometer. It says 1 kilometer is 1.001 of 1 meter, right? So what the heck does this mean? 1 over 0.001. Well, let's look at the denominator first by itself. Do you remember how to do that? How do you change a decimal to a fraction? Well, let's look at how many units there are. Tens, hundreds, thousands, right? So this is 1/1000th of a meter. But that's just in the denominator, right? That's here. So we're saying the reciprocal, 1 over 1/1000th. And do you remember how to divide fractions? Well, when you divide by this fraction, you multiply by the reciprocal. So it's 1 times 1,000 over 1, which is 1,000. So what this is really saying is that 1 kilometer is 1,000 meters. So that's kind of confusing, the way that they wrote the table. The rest of them make sense, right? So a nanometer is 1/1,000,000th of a meter, 1/1,000,000th. And a micron, sorry, that's 1/1000,000th, isn't it? Sorry. And this is 1/1,000,000th. A micron is 1/1,000,000th of a meter. Okay, so now it's time to do some harder problems. So let's try this, which is a little bit tougher now. We're going to say, a human hair, this is what she said in the video, is 100 microns wide. How many centimeters is that? Which, you can't take a hair out of your head and measure it on a ruler with centimeters, right? It's just way too small. So if I took 100 microns and I changed it into meters from that table, right? That we know that there's 1,000,000 microns in 1 meter. And the way I'm doing this is so that microns will cancel, right? So that's how I'm dividing by 1,000,000, right? But I don't want meters. That's going to be a tiny, 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 tiny number, right? I want it to be in centimeters. So how do I change this to be centimeters and cancel the meters? Well, we also know that there's 100 centimeters in 1 meter, and that's going to allow me to cancel the meters. So all units now have canceled except for the centimeters. So now let's look at the multiplication. We have 100 times 100 all over 1,000,000. So 100 times 100, there's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4 zeros. 4. And then 1,000,000 in the denominator. And that's going to be in centimeters. So how do we simplify that? Well, the zeros will cancel, right? Divide by 10, divide by 10, divide by 10, divide by 10. So what's left over here is just 2 zeros, which means it's 1/100th of a centimeter. And there's your answer. I hope that helps.